Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, May the 13th. Thank you, Kim. May the 13th, Wednesday. This is Midweek Manna. I'm Reverend Holly McKim, coming to you from Hudson United Methodist Church in Hudson, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking some time out. If you're watching us live, we love to hear from you. Give us a like or a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you're on your lunch hour. Hello, Amy Winkler. If you're on your lunch break, sitting at your desk eating lunch, I'm coming to you live. Or maybe you're going to watch us later in the day or even another day. We come to you each Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time with just a thought. It's my prayer that something is said, either the scripture or my words, or maybe even a thought that comes to you in this time of devotion and meditation, that it nourishes your soul, that it gives you encouragement, that it uplifts you, that it shines light into the darkness. That's my prayer for this midweek manna. I want to give you just a little bit of a history lesson you probably remember from your classes in school. Thomas Jefferson, right after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, he set about to find out what this new land was all about. He commissioned Meriwether Lewis and William Clark and the Corps of Discovery, their group of travelers, to go through that land that was purchased from France, the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase didn't go all the way west to the Pacific Ocean, and some of the goals of the Corps of Discovery and Lewis and Clark, their exploration, was to find out about this land that they had purchased, to find out what kinds of soil, what the soil was like, the native inhabitants, both human and animal, the flowers, the plants that grew there. Maybe there were some minerals. So find out about the land, the climate, what kinds of things grow there. But then the secondary goal, and maybe the more pressing goal, Jefferson was hoping that there would be a water passage over the mountain and to the Pacific Ocean, a northwest passage. At that time, in the early 1800s, there was a thought, a scientific thought about geology, that there was symmetry in this land that was the burgeoning United States of America. And that, like in the eastern part of the country, the smooth transition from the Atlantic Ocean to the Appalachian Mountain Range, to those gently sloping mountains with the trees, and then it would slide back down on the other side. They felt like there was a symmetry. So to the western edge of the Louisiana Purchase, they knew there was a mountain, but they anticipated that in their canoes from the Missouri River to the headwaters and into the Columbia River, that they would be able to climb the mountain, get in their canoes, and go whoosh, right down to the Pacific Ocean, finding that northwest passage. Now, Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery were on their mission for about 2.5 years, trying to find that northwest passage. Of course, there was no northwest passage. There was no navigable river crossing the Rocky Mountains. Can you imagine? You're in a canoe up to a certain point. You've carried your canoe, and you come to a mountain. You climb the mountain, only to realize that there are mountains on top of mountains on top of mountains, and they look nothing like the Appalachian Range. These are massive, huge, rocky mountains, snow-covered mountains. And so if you're Lewis and Clark and those in their party, the Corps of Discovery, what do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when you have a canoe and you're looking at mountain after mountain after mountain after mountain? Todd Bolsinger uses this idea in his book, Canoeing the Mountains. Now, Todd Bolsinger is writing a book on adaptive leadership, a great book, by the way, and he uses the story of Lewis and Clark and their adaptive ability to change what they're doing, to use what they know, to use their knowledge and their skills to do something different, to take another step in their exploration, not in a canoe. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Jesus' disciples, I see them as having this kind of question to Jesus. In the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 1 through 14. Now this is before Jesus' crucifixion. That's John 14, verses 1 through 14. Jesus is talking to his disciples, talking to his followers, and he's telling them ahead of time, I'm going to be leaving you, and I'm going to my Father. And he says, you know the path. And then Thomas. Many people call Thomas doubting. I call Thomas authentically human, because Thomas says what everybody else is thinking, probably. He says, we don't know the way, Jesus. We don't know the way. We don't know the path. Thomas is thinking about a physical path, a physical way. Like Lewis and Clark getting to the top of a mountain and only having a canoe. And now what do we do? And Thomas is like, you're leaving us? We don't know the path you're taking. We don't know how to get to where you are going. And then Philip says, show us the Father. Everything's going to be all right. You, Jesus, show us the Father. And then Jesus is like, you've seen the Father. You've seen me. You've been with me. I am in the Father. The Father is in me. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Jesus is thinking about a spiritual path and leading the way. And what do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when you don't know what the next step is? Now, I realize that we are in a difficult time, and I realize that many of you might be experiencing loss and grief and challenges beyond anything you could have imagined during this stay-at-home order, this COVID-19. Who in the world had ever heard of coronavirus before the first of this year? Certainly not us. And what do you do next? What do you do when you don't know what to do? I want to uplift a few of the verses that Jesus tells his followers in this Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 1 through 14. I want to maybe uplift them and highlight them, maybe in your situation, in your current, maybe it's not related to coronavirus at all, but we can all possibly use this as nourishment for this journey. First, Jesus says in the very first verse, he says, don't be troubled. Trust in God. Okay. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. Especially when you don't know where you're going, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what the next step is. But that's the first thing Jesus says. The second thing I would maybe lift up to you to remember. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and at first he's very calm and very assured of himself, because it's not written in Scripture, but I assume Jesus knows these people that have been following him for the last 3 years. He knows their skills, he knows their abilities, he knows their knowledge. He knows that they have an innate ability to adapt. He's telling them, I'm not going to be with you always. He knows that. And he is confident in their ability to continue the ministry after he is gone. I'm telling you, you are a created being of God, a beloved child of God, and you have skills and knowledge and ability. You have an adaptive quality that you can learn new skills, new knowledge, new abilities. We all can. To take the next step. Maybe you're not going to have all the knowledge that you need for 10 steps down the road, but just for the next step, you have the ability to adapt to this journey. And the third thing I want to lift to you, that Jesus tells his followers after he recognizes that they in fact don't understand, that they don't have the confidence in themselves to continue the ministry that Jesus has begun. And Jesus gives his disciples some encouragement. He says in verse 12 of John chapter 14, he says, I assure you that whoever believes in me will do the works that I do. He's saying, I believe in you. You're going to do the works that I have done. And Jesus continues with that encouragement. He says, they will do even greater works than these. We as created beings have the ability to adapt and overcome, to grow, to learn. It is a tremendous opportunity to grow, to learn, to think differently, to rise up onto the top of this mountain of COVID-19. We don't know what lies beyond it. Things might be different when we get to the top, when we get to the peak. But God has given us skills and abilities. And Jesus Christ says, you will do greater works than these. Amen, amen, and amen. It is my prayer that you are nourished, that your soul tending and your spiritual journey, that you find what you need for the next step. I hope you'll join me on Sunday at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Join us for worship here at Hudson United Methodist Church with Mark and Debbie Parker, with Kim Burns doing our technology, and me, Holly McKim. I thank you for joining us today, and I invite you to join us on Sunday. Hope to see you then. God bless. Bye for now.